We had been hiking the Appalachian Trail for 4 days when we first heard it. A second set of footsteps, slightly offbeat from our own, like an echo but heavier. My friend Ryan thought it was just the wind rustling the trees. Maybe a deer, maybe our own paranoia. But I knew better. It started at dusk. We were setting up camp when I felt watched, like something was just beyond the tree line, just beyond my sight. I told myself it was nothing. But at night as we lay in our tent, we heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Right outside. Ryan grabbed his flashlight, unzipped the tent and shined the light out. Nothing. Just darkness and trees swaying in the wind. Probably an animal, he muttered, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. The next day we found something. A trail of footprints in the dirt behind us. Large, human-shaped, but wrong. The toes were too long, curling into the earth like roots. The prints went in single file, perfectly aligned with our own, except they only appeared where the ground was soft enough to take them. Whatever was following us wasn't always touching the ground. That night, we agreed to take turns staying awake. Ryan fell asleep first, leaving me alone with the fire. Every so often, I'd hear the crunch of leaves, the faintest shift in the dark. Around 3 a.m. something happened that froze my blood. A whisper. Close. Right behind me. Why did you leave me? I spun, expecting to see Ryan awake playing a prank. But he was still snoring in the tent. The whisper had come from behind me. From the trees. I didn't wake him. I didn't want him to know how scared I was. I sat there, heart pounding, gripping my knife until the first hints of dawn broke through the trees. Ryan was the one who noticed it first. Deep scratches in the bark of a tree forming words, "I'm still with you." We left immediately. Packed up and hiked as fast as we could. But the footsteps never stopped. The last night as we finally reached the edge of the woods, I swear I saw it. A figure, impossibly thin, standing between the trees. Watching. Its face was obscured by shadows, but I could feel its gaze, cold, relentless, ancient. My breath hitched. I wanted to call out to Ryan to ask if he saw it too, but my throat locked up. Some primal instinct screamed at me, "Don't acknowledge it." Ryan didn't stop. He didn't look. He just kept walking, his pace quickening. I forced myself to follow. The tree line was close now, just a few dozen yards away. I swore I could feel the thing moving, shifting between the trunks, matching our pace. Then the whisper came again. "You can't leave me." This time it wasn't behind me. It was inside me. In my ears, in my bones. The weight of it pressed down on my chest as if unseen hands were curling around my ribs, squeezing. Ryan must have sensed something because he grabbed my wrist and yanked me forward. "Don't stop," he hissed. "Don't turn around." We ran. The woods blurred around us, dark shapes twisting in the corners of my vision. The whispering grew louder, overlapping voices now, some pleading, some angry, all of them clawing at the edges of my mind. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, silence. We stumbled out of the trees and into the parking lot where our car sat waiting, bathed in the golden glow of morning. My lungs burned. My legs ached. But we were out. We were safe. Or so I thought. As we drove away, I let myself breathe, let the tension ease just a little. Ryan was pale, gripping the steering wheel too tightly, but neither of us spoke. What was there to say? Then, as we rounded a bend, something caught my eye in the side mirror. A figure. Standing at the edge of the woods. Still watching. Still waiting. And just before we turned the corner, I saw its mouth move. "See you soon." Neither of us spoke for the first hour of the drive. The hum of the engine was the only sound, broken occasionally by Ryan's shallow breathing. I kept my eyes on the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that thing standing in the middle of the road, waiting. But there was nothing. Just empty asphalt stretching behind us. It didn't feel over though. I could still hear the whisper. Not words, not anymore. Just the faintest echo in the back of my mind, like something pressing against the edges of my thoughts, trying to find a way in. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. "Did you see it?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah." He gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I don't think it's gone." I glanced at him. His face was pale, dark circles under his eyes. He looked how I felt, drained. "What do you mean?" His fingers drummed against the wheel. "Ever since we left, I feel like it's still there. Just, not where we can see it." I wanted to tell him he was just paranoid. That we were safe now. But I didn't believe it. Then my phone buzzed. A single notification. "Unknown number, I'm still with you." I dropped the phone like it burned me. Ryan glanced over. "What?" I didn't answer. Just picked up the phone with shaking hands and opened my messages. Nothing. The text was gone. Like it had never been there. My stomach twisted. "We need to talk to someone," I said finally. Maybe a ranger? Or? Ryan shook his head. And tell them what? That something followed us out of the woods? That we're seeing things? They'll think we're crazy. He wasn't wrong. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we had brought something back with us. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes I saw it again. Standing in the trees. Watching. And then, sometime around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. I wasn't alone. The air in my room felt heavy, thick with something unseen. I lay frozen, listening, my breath shallow. The door had been shut when I went to bed. I was sure of it. I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking as I turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, landing on my open doorway. Nothing. But the feeling remained. Slowly I sat up, my ears straining for any sound. The hallway beyond my door was empty. The silence was almost worse than noise, thick, expectant. I turned my phone screen toward me, checking the time. 3:03 a.m. Then the screen flickered. A notification popped up. Unknown number. I'm inside. My stomach dropped. My flashlight wavered as I scanned the room, my pulse pounding in my ears. No. I forced myself to stand, moving slowly toward the door, my every instinct screaming at me to stay in bed. I peeked into the hallway. Darkness. Then footsteps. Not from the hall. From inside my room. I spun, shoving the light toward the corner near my closet, and my breath caught in my throat. Something stood there. Tall. Thin. A shape barely distinguishable from the shadows, its limbs too long, its fingers curling against its sides like withered branches. And its face. No face. Just darkness, shifting where features should be. The air around it was wrong, warping like heat off pavement, but freezing. I felt it in my bones, an unnatural chill creeping through me. The whisper came again. You can't leave me. My body moved before my brain could process it. I lunged for the door, slamming it shut behind me, heart hammering. I didn't stop. I ran down the hall, out the front door, into the cold night air. I didn't stop running until I was standing in the middle of the street, barefoot, breath fogging in the air. The neighborhood was silent. But I knew I wasn't alone. I was hiking alone in the Smoky Mountains when I found the trail. It wasn't on my map. It wasn't marked. But it was there, cutting through the trees in a way that seemed almost intentional. I should have ignored it. But I was curious. It started normal enough. A little overgrown but easy to follow. I walked for about a mile when I noticed something strange. The trees around me were dead. Not in a natural way, but blackened, charred, as if they had burned in some fire that never touched the rest of the forest. And the deeper I went, the quieter it became. No birds. No rustling leaves. Just silence. Then I found the cabin. It was old, rotting, the door barely hanging on. I shouldn't have gone inside. But I did. The air was thick with the scent of decay. Bones littered the floor. Small ones, maybe raccoons or rabbits. Maybe not. And on the walls, carved deep into the wood, were words. Over and over, it's not gone. It's never gone. I turned to leave, but something stopped me. A noise, faint but unmistakable. Breathing. Right behind me. I ran. I didn't look back. I don't know how long I ran, but when I finally stumbled back onto the main trail, gasping for breath, I realized something horrifying. My footprints. They only went one way. There were no prints leading back. I stood there, staring at the dirt path, my chest rising and falling in shallow, panicked breaths. I turned in circles, looking for any sign that I had actually walked into the woods, that I had taken that cursed path to begin with. But there was nothing. No broken branches. No disturbed leaves. No second set of prints. It was as if I had simply appeared here. The forest was still unnervingly quiet, the weight of that silence pressing down on me. The rational part of my brain screamed that I needed to move, to get as far away from that hidden trail as possible. But then I heard it. The breathing. Not behind me this time. Ahead. I felt my stomach drop. My legs locked in place. It was close, too close, just beyond the trees. Slow. Wet. Ragged. Like something struggling to fill its lungs. Then the smell hit me. Rot. Thick, cloying, like something long dead, something that had been left to fester in the heat of summer. It curled into my nose, settled in the back of my throat. I took a shaky step backward and the breathing hitched. It hurt me. The trees in front of me swayed, but there was no wind. And then I saw it. A figure. Emerging from the shadows between the trees. At first I thought it was human. Tall, draped in something dark. But as it moved closer, my stomach twisted. It wasn't wearing anything. What I had mistaken for clothes was its skin, charred, blackened, cracked like burned wood. And its face, God, its face. There weren't eyes exactly. Just hollow, gaping holes where they should have been. Its mouth hung slightly open, and as it breathed, that horrible rattling sound filled the air. Then it spoke. A whisper, crawling through the silence like fingers over my skin. You were never meant to leave. Something snapped inside me. I turned and ran, sprinting down the trail, my lungs burning, my vision tunneling. I didn't look back, I couldn't. The sound of footsteps followed me. Heavy, unnatural, the crack of burned flesh peeling away with each step. I don't remember how I got back to my car. I only remember one last thing. As I threw myself into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut, I made the mistake of looking up, just once, at the tree line. It was there, standing just beyond the last row of trees. Watching. Waiting. And then, it smiled. A grin too wide. Too full of teeth. The last thing I saw before I sped away? It lifted one charred hand and waved. I didn't stop driving. Not for miles. Not until I was well past the park entrance, past the twisting mountain roads, past anything that even resembled a forest. Only then did I pull over, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My heart was still hammering against my ribs, my breathing uneven. I was safe. I had to be. I forced myself to check my rearview mirror. The road behind me was empty. No dark figures. No impossible grins. Just asphalt stretching into the distance. I exhaled, trying to slow my pulse. But then, tup, tup, tup. My entire body went rigid. The sound had come from the passenger side window. Slow. Deliberate. Like someone knocking. But I was alone. I turned my head, slowly, so slowly, until my eyes met the window. Nothing. Just the empty road, the trees far behind me. I let out a shaky breath, pressing a hand to my face. I was losing it. Then my phone buzzed. I nearly jumped out of my skin. With trembling fingers I picked it up. One new notification. Unknown number, you were never meant to leave. A chill spread through my veins, my hands going ice cold. And then, my phone screen flickered. For half a second, the reflection in my darkened screen changed. It wasn't my face staring back at me anymore. It was its charred, hollow-eyed, grinning. I threw my phone onto the passenger seat, my pulse spiking. The knocking came again. Tup, tup, tup. I didn't look this time. I just slammed my foot on the gas and tore down the highway, tires screeching against the pavement. I didn't stop again. Not until I was home. Not until I was inside, doors locked, every light in the house on. I collapsed onto my couch, trying to convince myself it was over, that I had escaped. But then I noticed something. The smell. Faint. Lingering. Like something burned. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look. I really didn't. But I did. One new message. No number this time. No name. Just 2 words. Look outside. I didn't want to. I really didn't want to. But I did. And there, standing beneath the streetlight, was a figure. Still watching. Still waiting. I staggered back from the window, my pulse hammering in my ears. No. This wasn't happening. I was home. I was safe. But it was still there. Still grinning. Still waiting. I yanked the curtains shut, my hands shaking so badly I nearly ripped the fabric. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. I grabbed my phone again, my fingers fumbling to unlock the screen. I needed help. Someone. Anyone. I dialed Ryan's number. It rang once. Twice. Then click. Pause. Then breathing. That same wet, rattling breath. I nearly dropped the phone. You were never meant to leave. I threw the phone across the room, my chest heaving. This wasn't real. This wasn't real. I turned back toward the window, a terrible feeling creeping up my spine. Don't look. Don't look. But I did. And it was closer. No longer beneath the streetlight. Now it was on my lawn. Still standing. Still grinning. The lights inside my house flickered. A cold dread curled around my ribs like fingers. I needed to go. I needed to get out. I turned toward the door, hand reaching for the knob. Tup, tup, tup. I froze. The sound wasn't coming from the window anymore. It was coming from inside the house. Behind me. My throat locked. The air turned thick, heavy. My hand trembled as I turned, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run. The hallway was dark. Too dark. The light in my living room was off now. But there, at the end of the hall, a shadow. Tall. Thin. Watching. The lights flickered again. The air smelled like smoke, like burned wood and rot. And then, the whisper. You can't leave me. The last thing I saw before the lights went out completely? That grin. Too wide. Too full of teeth. I used to love solo hiking. The isolation, the stillness, the feeling of being completely alone in the world, there was something peaceful about it. That changed last summer. I had taken a week off work to explore a remote stretch of forest in Montana, miles from any town or paved road. I planned to hike deep into the wilderness and camp for a few nights. No cell service, no distractions, just me and nature. The first day was uneventful. I followed a marked trail for about 12 miles before veering off into an unmarked area. I found a good spot to set up camp, cook dinner, and fell asleep under the stars. That night I woke up to a sound. A soft whistling. At first I thought it was the wind, but the pattern was too deliberate. 3 rising notes, then a pause, then 3 descending notes. It seemed to be coming from the trees behind my tent. I sat up and listened. It stopped. I convinced myself it was just a bird and went back to sleep. The second night I heard it again. Closer. This time the whistle was coming from multiple directions. One to my left, another far off to the right, and then a third one much closer, directly behind my tent. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I packed up and started hiking back toward my car. But after about an hour, I realized something was wrong. The trail looked different. I was sure I had followed my own tracks, but the trees were unfamiliar. The landmarks I had noted were gone. And then I saw them. Small wooden carvings hanging from the branches. They were crude little figures, shaped like people, each with a hole where the mouth should have been. I turned and ran. The whistling started again, this time from all around me. I ran for what felt like hours. My legs were aching, my breath was ragged. The whistling never stopped. I don't remember how I made it back to my car. The last thing I recall is seeing the road, throwing myself into the driver's seat and speeding away. I still hear the whistle sometimes. Outside my window at night. 3 rising notes. Pause. 3 descending notes. At first, I thought it was my imagination. Just my mind playing tricks on me, reliving that horrible night in the woods. But then last week my neighbor heard it too. I was in my kitchen staring out into my backyard when I heard it, soft but clear just beyond the tree line. 3 rising notes. Pause. 3 descending notes. I froze. My pulse hammered in my ears. I turned off the lights, hoping to make myself invisible in the darkness. My phone was on the counter. I grabbed it, fingers shaking, and typed out a text to my neighbor, Mark. Do you hear that? A few seconds later my phone buzzed. WTF. Yes. What is that? I didn't answer. I was too busy watching the trees. There was movement in the shadows, something shifting between the trunks. I felt it before I saw it, an overwhelming sense that I was being watched. Then the figures appeared. Small, hunched shapes, barely visible in the darkness, standing just beyond my fence. Their heads were tilted at unnatural angles, their bodies motionless. I slammed my blinds shut. My hands were slick with sweat as I locked every door and window in the house. My phone vibrated again. Dude, I just saw something. People? I think they're in my yard. I didn't sleep that night. By morning they were gone. No footprints. No sign that anything had been there. But something was different. The carvings were hanging from my porch. The same crude figures from the forest, their hollow mouths gaping open. And last night the whistling came from inside my house. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The sound was soft at first, drifting through the dark like a breeze slipping under the door. 3 rising notes. Pause. 3 descending notes. It was inside. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. My bedroom door was shut, but I could see the faintest sliver of light from the hallway pressing through the gap beneath it. My phone was on my nightstand. Slowly, without making a sound, I reached for it. I typed a message to Mark. They're inside. I hit send and waited. Seconds passed. Then a minute. No reply. The whistling came again, closer this time. Right outside my door. My throat tightened as the doorknob twitched. A soft, deliberate click echoed through the room. Not like someone jiggling it by mistake, but testing it, seeing if it was locked. I pressed my back against the wall, gripping my phone so hard my fingers ached. Then silence. For a moment I thought maybe I had imagined it. Maybe it was some half-dream, some lingering paranoia from the forest. But then I heard the floorboards creak. Slow, deliberate steps moving away from my door down the hall. I forced myself to move. Carefully, I slid out of bed and crept to my closet, stepping inside as quietly as I could. I eased the door shut and held my breath. Then something new. A whisper. Not words. Not even a voice. Just the sound of breath, slow and rattling, slipping through invisible lips, was in my room. I clenched my jaw, my heartbeat slamming against my ribs. I could hear it moving, pacing in the darkness. A soft shuffle of feet against the carpet. Then a sound that made my stomach turn cold. The creak of my closet door. I didn't wait. I lunged forward, shoving hard, knocking whatever was on the other side back. My feet hit the floor as I sprinted for the front door, fumbling with the locks. My hands were slick, trembling, barely able to twist the deadbolt. The whistling started again, but this time it was deafening. All around me. I yanked the door open and ran. The street was empty. Mark's house was dark. My bare feet slapped against the pavement as I reached his front door, pounding against it with both fists. "Mark, open up." My voice cracked. No answer. Then from behind me a voice. Not a whisper. Not a whistle. A voice. Very close. Right behind my ear. "You shouldn't have left." I turned. And everything went black.